The Healing Spring Show, healing families and communities by breaking the stigma of addiction and expanding the scope of recovery. Now here's your host, John Edmondson.
So how do we make a difference in the school beyond just the education component of it? It's important to have grades go up and have discipline issues go down, but what about what's going on inside of the kids? Their challenges, their hopes, their dreams, their worries, concerns. Today we have an expert in counseling and working with kids in schools, Marcene Weatherall. She's here today to talk more about it. Marcene.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Welcome. We're really glad to have you here today. So let's start off. Tell us your title, a little bit about what you do.
Okay, so I am Marcene Weatherall, and I am the Director of Counseling Intervention Services for Keller ISD, which means a whole lot. Okay. So I am responsible for addressing all things that create a barrier to academic success. So I have a team of 14 intervention counselors, and we are addressing all social emotional responsive services in the school district. As time has went on, I think it's pretty obvious, and now we're on the same page where we're marrying academics and understanding that you can't teach a kid who is mentally ill. You can't teach a kid who is under the influence of a substance. You can't teach a kid who's homeless and thinking about a fight that just happened at home, or who may be hungry and different things like that. And so the services we provide in the school district address those things that create a barrier to academic success so that our kids can be more successful in the educational environment.
That sounds powerful. That sounds very powerful. So you're saying that all these different things need to be addressed before even the education can happen itself.
Absolutely. And I think we're learning that even as early as kindergarten or even pre-K, where these outbursts of negative behaviors are a kid's way of communicating a need. And so if we can implement intervention services as early as 3, 4, 5 years old and up throughout the time that kids are in school, we'll see a major difference in just emotional stability with our kids, and whether or not kids start using drugs and they engage in all of these at-risk behaviors if their needs are met and they don't act out as much.
So if their needs are met, they don't act out as much. So for a lot of people, this is going to be a new realm, a new idea for them, because most people think, well, if they're acting right, then that's all we need. If their grades are right, that's all they need. And you're addressing that some. But can you talk about how you would actually make some of this happen? How would you actually help kids address some of these needs?
And I want to go back a little bit, too, because sometimes we have a misperception of what acting out means, and if they're acting right, and what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah, I want to go to that.
Because
Thank
even
you.
That kid who's in the corner that's acting well, as we call it, acting well, and what does that mean? Does that mean that they're silent, that they're not saying much, that they're quiet and in their seat and not moving, and so we think that all is well, and maybe that's the isolated kid who is really lonely and depressed, and so we're overlooking that silence because the behavior is inward and not outward. And so we have to be really careful when we say acting out, and just be careful about what we're missing with our young people. And if they're getting good grades, does that mean that they're not struggling with stress of academics, and that they're not perfectionist, and that they're not suicidal? It doesn't mean that. So good grades are not a reflection, or a good kid and good behavior is not a reflection of an emotionally stable young person.
Got it. So we're looking at this. What does that mean? They're not acting out, but they're not okay at the same time?
It could be, absolutely. So there's a lot of indicators that we miss with young people, and I think what intervention counseling does, or what counseling does as a whole, whether it's in school or not, is we're developing relationships with young people. And people say kind of, what is the premise of intervention counseling? And it's about relationships. What's the premise of academic success and what our administrators need to be doing? It's relationships. When you develop relationships with kids, you begin to understand what that kid needs, what that kid may or may not be struggling with. And we kind of get outside of ourselves as adults, and we try to figure out how we could best help that student and what those resources may be.
So when you're talking, it's powerful. I want to back up a little bit. What is your experience? Because it's obvious you have a lot of understanding of this. I mean, right off the bat, it's clear. You know it looks like you know what we need, and I agree with you 100% of the way. How did you come to these ideas and this understanding? Where did you start in your journey?
So my junior year of high school, I had my first psychology class, And of course, I was that kid in high school who didn't really know what I wanted to do. In that one psychology class, I said, I know I want to work with people. I want to better understand why people think the way they do. And I'm a lover of people. I love people. I want to understand people and their minds. And so I went to Bennett College, which was a small HBCU in Greensboro, North Carolina, and I majored in psychology. And my whole goal at that time was to be a child psychologist. I'm going to work with kids and families, and
Nice.
and I loved kids, and I wanted to help those kids that are abused and those kids that are in really, really bad situations. So I go on to graduate school at Western Michigan University, and it's time for me to do my internship. And I land an internship at this steel case factory, which is in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and they have a counseling center for kids and families. And the very first task that I'm given is to work with a group of men who are alcoholics. And so I was totally scared about that, because I'm like, I was not looking at an arena of substance abuse or alcohol or drugs. I want to work with kids and families and do all of these incredible things that I thought I was supposed to be doing.
And they just handed that
and
to
they
you.
handed it to me, and
Wow.
I loved it. And it was successful. And I was really hungry to learn more in the arena of substance abuse. And so it kind of became my pathway, is substance abuse. And so from there, I began working in the treatment field. I was a probation officer for 10 years in both Michigan and Dallas when I moved here. And my specialized caseload was mental health and substance abuse. And so the longer I worked in that arena, the more I became interested in what are we missing before these young people get on probation? What are we missing before they get in trouble and they commit these crimes and they make these bad decisions? What are we missing before they engage in these at-risk behaviors and make these choices? And so I really started to dig into what's happening at school age, and I got the great opportunity to be able to come into the school district and do intervention work. And that started off with purely substance abuse, and it has grown into all of mental health, because that's really what our kids need. Substance abuse is a part of
It's a piece of the
mental health
puzzle.
services, and it's a
Yeah.
piece of the puzzle.
Can I ask? So
Yes.
I want to back up some. I'm hearing all these interesting stories of what you went through. So you went from psychology, then dealing with addiction and having phenomenal success, and then in the probation. The area in probation was psychology. Did I hear that? Psychological issues? Or was it just...
So in probation, my caseload was specialized in
Specialized,
mental
yeah.
health and substance abuse issues as I continued my graduate work and received my graduate
Yeah.
degree in counseling psychology.
What does that look like when you have the people come in the door? Because some people, I think they work in the field, they know very clearly, but
Mhm.
what does that even mean? What does that look like to have someone come in, probation and mental health?
Well, I think even in the probation arena or in the legal arena, in juvenile justice and even adult legal system, we forget that many of these people have mental health and substance abuse issues, which in turn is a sickness or a disease that has either been unaddressed, ignored, unmedicated. And so even in digging into my probation cases, I became so intrigued and started spending so much time. It was a joke in our office. You can't spend an hour with your probationer. You're trying to be superwoman.
Mhm.
But I was using my counseling piece, and I was trying to understand, how did this person get here? What decisions did they make, and why did they make those decisions? What happened in their life and childhood that was not addressed? Why did they ever make the choice to take that first substance and to experiment with
Sure.
that drug or that alcohol, and what was going on in their mind, and what were they thinking, and what services and resources did they need then, and what services and resources can I provide now? And I think in addition to that, I've even seen it in the school district with intervention services, but even in the legal system, I think we have to move beyond the actual person sitting in front of you, and we have to implement a family systems approach. Usually if one person's broken,
Mhm.
the entire family's broken. Or the entire family is playing a piece. And a lot of times we're concentrating so much on this one person or that student in the district, and we're not looking at the whole family. And so resources have to be put into place for the family and even the community surrounding that family.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. So
Mhm.
you're saying these people, even the probation, and we're transitioning some in the school too, they're not just all these bad people making bad choices.
Absolutely.
Just
and I say that
undisciplined,
all
get over
the
it kind of
time.
stuff.
Absolutely. I say our kids are not bad kids. They're making bad choices. And they're making choices within the realm of their knowledge, within the realm of their experience, within the realm of who they are and what they know. And so, you know, even when you look in substance abuse and you look at research, the number one reason why young people ever make that choice, there's lots of reasons, but it's low perception of harm. Well, whose responsibility is it to increase their perception of harm? It's the adults around them to educate them. And how much do we shield our kids from what they really need to know? How much do we tiptoe around our kids? Let's not talk about it. If you introduce that, you're going to tell the kids about it and they're going to do it. Research proves that that's not true. And so I'm kind of an in-your-face person, even in my program and in the work that I do and the team that I have. When I present, I always say to parents in the community, if you want me to present, I'm going to tell it like it is. We tiptoe around our kids too much. We tiptoe around our parents too much. Parents need to be having these conversations. Parents need to get involved and parents need help.
Well, I can feel your passion from over here. This is exciting. I'm glad you're with us today.
Thank you.
Because I can feel it. This means something to you. This isn't just a job. This isn't just filling something off or filling a blank in your life. This is like, I want to do this.
Absolutely.
This is what I was born to do.
Absolutely. I do believe I'm walking in my purpose.
Walking in purpose.
And I'm reminded of that every single day in my job.
Yeah. Well, tell us more about your job. What does a day look like for you and your team?
I think the best job that I've ever had that really prepared me for what I'm doing now is when I worked as the director of a community coalition with Tarrant County Challenge. Because there is nothing more important than mobilizing a community and getting resources around the table to address a need or to establish resources that a community needs, that a family needs, or that a student needs. And so taking all of those resources, all of those community partnerships, those mobilization skills, and then bringing them into the school district. I continue to do coalition work in the school district. I continue to have all of these amazing partnerships. And I believe that the school district sits within the community. And to educate our kids, to keep our kids safe, to address their mental health, substance abuse issues, or whatever the issues are, it takes an entire community. And so lots of programming that I do in the district involves the community and involves additional resources, programming in district for our kids, so that everybody plays a role and everybody's hands are on site addressing the needs of our kids and our families. And then you have a vested interest in the students and the families if you're a part of it.
So it's a team effort.
Absolutely.
And it's not just about grades then.
Absolutely. I think we're finally to a point where we're understanding we have to marry academics and mental health. It can't be separate. We have all of these services over here where we're addressing the needs of the kids, and then we have all of these academic services over here. They have to go hand in hand. And I think we're working really hard in Keller to make that happen. We understand that. We have the support because you can't educate a hungry kid. You can't educate a high kid. You can't educate a worried and anxious kid. So if you don't address that need first, you can't talk to them about math. You can't give them formulas and projects to do. They may not even have the resources at home to complete that project. But how would you know that? Because you developed a relationship with that kid.
Yeah,
it's all about relationships when you have a connection.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're really more about building a community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's not only important, but I think it's absolutely necessary to do the work that we truly need to do.
So tell me about the work. I've met your team, and I was really blown away by watching the interactions, watching you interact with them, watching what they were doing and talking about. It's phenomenal. I haven't seen that very often in school systems, all these clinicians at that level. Can you talk about it? What your team looks like? What do you do? Who you bring in?
I have a phenomenal team of 14 intervention counselors, but we sit close with a phenomenal counseling team in Keller ISD as a whole in a wonderful district. But what the intervention counselors are they are licensed professionals, so licensed beyond campus counseling. So they're like a supplemental source to our campus counseling program. So their licensure are anywhere from LPCs, licensed professional counselors, to licensed masters in social work. We have some LSSPs, which are licensed school psychologists, LCDCs, licensed chemical dependency counselors. So they have to have some professional licensure and some experience within the school district working with students and families. And at the elementary level, and we do have intervention counselors at the elementary level, we have 5 intervention counselors that have about 4 to 5 campuses each. And so they serve and they're a resource to those campuses. And then we have 4, 5 through 8 counselors who serve 5th through 8th grade, and they have about 2 to 3 campuses. And then we have 1 intervention counselor on each high school and 1 intervention counselor at our Keller Learning Center. And our Keller Learning Center has our alternative high school, and it also has our discipline alternative education placement together. And so she's housed there working with the most at-risk kids.
So what does a day look like for all of that?
Oh my goodness. So there is no typical day with intervention counseling. You can have a schedule, you can have an agenda. I as a director can have my day planned out as to what campuses I may visit or what work I'm going to get done. But we are also responsible for all the crisis in the school district. So if something is going on that is creating some significant disruption to the student's life or the family's life or even staff, we're responsible for stabilizing crisis in our school district. And so although they are assigned to campuses, we are also the leads of the flight teams that go out to campuses to serve and stabilize with specific crisis issues. And
leads of the flight teams. Can you say a little bit more about that?
So our flight teams in our school district, we have about 10 flight teams in our district. And they are led by our intervention and lead counselors. And there's about 10 counselors on each flight team. And so the intervention counseling department is in charge of crisis responsive services. And so if there is a situation that has happened, maybe a student has completed suicide, maybe there was a staff loss, maybe there was some type of a significant threat on campus and it's creating some huge emotional disturbance. I will dispatch one of our flight teams that will go out. The leads will facilitate and they will go out and they will take care of that campus and everyone who needs to be taken care of as a part of that campus, parents, community, for that day, multiple days, just depending on how long we need to actually go in, stabilize the situation, what communication needs to go out. I work personally with the administrators to try to make sure that our administrators are taken care of, that they can kind of sit back and we can help make discussions on what needs to be communicated, and basically creating some emotional stability and balance in the midst of a crisis so that we can get back to business at hand, and then making sure that that family is also taken care of and providing whatever resources that they may need. And the crisis response could last for a long time. Maybe we have a student who was out for a period of time, and upon coming back, we're going to need to work with some transitional pieces. Or we have a student death, and we're going to need to work with that campus over a period of time, or those students that were really close, or the classroom and the teachers that student was a part of. So no crisis looks the same. No day in the life of an intervention counselor looks the same. And then it looks very different from level to level. Your kindergarten intervention counselors are looking and dealing with different issues than your high school intervention counselors.
So this isn't just move on like it used to be.
Not.
Yeah, the old story was, well, kind of they're young, they'll get over it, they're resilient. This really is not going to affect academic scores or grades. Just keep them moving. Let's not talk about it. And so now you're taking this very large leap, but I'm sure other districts do this now as well. But it sounds like y'all are spearheading it very well. Is going to making sure that everyone's okay, not just the next day or the day after, but as long as it takes to actually make it happen.
Absolutely.
But I bet the challenge is, we talked some off camera about this, it's easy to do test scores, right? Like, here's what your test score is. You can measure very easily. These are what we call soft skills. It's harder to measure that. What are you doing, or well, first of all, what do you see in these kids before you get to the measurement part? What do you see happen the change, the effect, maybe a
Our
story?
kids are not as resilient as they used to be. Our kids don't have the coping skills that they used to have. Our kids aren't taught the social and life skills that we used to be taught. I think of something as simple as home economics class when we grew up. When we graduated, we knew how to take care of household things. We knew how to write a check. You know, they don't write checks anymore, but whatever the newest thing would
whatever
be.
it
We
needs
knew
to
how
be.
to bank, we had these life skills. Our kids aren't getting those like we used to. Today's adolescent culture looks totally different than the way it used to. We lived in the just say no era. You just didn't engage in that behavior. You just say no. And you didn't really need any particular skills to say no. If people were engaging in negative behaviors that you didn't want to be a part of and they were over there, you made a choice not to join them, or you did if you wanted to. If you talk to a young person today about maneuvering their way through a typical day at school, or outside of school, they are saturated. It's like a maze. And so we can't just teach our kids to say no anymore. We have to teach them survival skills, refusal skills. We need to role play with them. We need to keep them out of the dark and bring them to the light of what's happening in this world. And we have to have conversations much earlier than we thought we ever had to in the past. You know, I talk to parents now. The national age for first-time use of marijuana is 9 years old today. So if you think about that, that's about third, fourth grade. So I challenge parents, have you had a conversation with your kids? If you know that, then conversations have to start even before that. And I can shoot out tons of statistics that prove that we need to have conversations earlier than we ever did. Is it comfortable? No. Is it fair? No. Is it good? Absolutely not. But do we as parents have to change the way we're parenting because of today's culture of kids and social media and technology and the things that they have access to within seconds in this entire world? Absolutely. Because we can't shield them and control their environments like we used to in the past. And so we've got to get the information out beforehand, and that's what prevention is all about. And you can't measure prevention. But what I do know we can measure is that we have the most anxious generation of young people than we've ever had, that have the most diagnosed mental health disorders than we've ever seen, with skyrocketing suicidal attempts and completions than we've ever seen. Something has to change, and kids don't change if adults don't change. Kids are the product of current parents and adults.
And to get a visual around this, I mean, you're saying talk to kids that are, how tall would that be? A 10-year-old. What are we thinking here? Help me out.
I don't know. Today's kids
They're
are
a little taller.
Absolutely.
They're a little bigger. So when I think about this, because I have a lot of friends, and you know, they all have kids, and we have these conversations, and it's like, well, no, you don't want to talk about that because you don't want to trigger them, or you don't want to put that into their mind. There's a fear, or we'll talk to them about when they're older. We're talking about 9-year-olds now.
We don't have the time anymore. We don't have the time to wait, and it's not the same reality. I've joked with some of my friends before that, you know, the things that we were able to do and get away with and learn from,
right,
I will kill our kids today. So we don't have the opportunity, we'll learn from that mistake. It's an unfair reality, but it's reality. And so we have to talk to our kids. We have to pay attention to our kids. We have to spend time with our kids. And more than anything, we have to develop relationships with our kids. We live in a busy, busy world.
Yeah, we do.
I mean, I know I have three children that are now adults, and my husband and I worked constantly and while my kids were growing up, and you have to be intentional about spending that quality time. And good parenting doesn't always yield the best results either. So I'm not saying that if you have a student engaging in at-risk behaviors, it's a fault of parenting. This is a community issue. This is a community effort. This is an accessibility issue. This is about what our kids have access to and what they're exposed to throughout this community, and not just at home. And so sometimes we can even control the home environment, but we can't control the community. And that's why change has to come via an entire community.
And that's a shift right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and for so many parents, they're so afraid of getting the finger pointed at them, you know, and it's a naming game, not a blaming game in the first place.
Absolutely.
But
and
then
some parents won't get help because of it.
they're afraid. I don't want to tell everything's fine because I don't want you to think it's me. My kid acts out.
Absolutely.
You're going to think I'm doing something to them. All these
Absolutely.
worries they have.
Absolutely.
And now you're saying this, it's all about the community. It's all about coming together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I talked to my kids till I was blue in the face about tons of different things because of my job and what I had experienced and what I had seen. It doesn't mean that they never made any bad choices, that they never engaged in any at-risk behaviors. And so again, parenting is really, really intentional right now. The community has to be very, very involved. And education has taken a major shift to where we are addressing the whole child. And you have to have mental health services embedded into the school district.
What does it mean? A lot of people ask that. They say mental health. I get a lot of this, and especially depending on the culture, because we're such a multicultural world now, right? Well, people say, well, I don't need those services. I'm not crazy, is one of those. Or my kid doesn't need it. He's fine. Go worry about that other kid who's acting out, even though their child may be acting in, like we talked about before. What does a mental health service look like or feel like for, there's no word average, doesn't exist, but for an individual, for a kid?
Well, I think we take two approaches. We take an individual approach and we take a district approach where we do lots of prevention programming. And so we talk about very early on healthy minds and healthy bodies and making good choices in relationships and healthy relationships and what that looks like. And as we continue to do all this programming throughout the district, the older our kids get, we embed some additional things into the curriculum, and then we do individual services, and that's where our counselors and our intervention counselors come in. And then I have partnered with so many community resources that we have services that come into our district and provide services like immediate mobile assessments if we have a crisis situation and a student needs to be evaluated for treatment. I have on-site intensive outpatient treatment that's at our Keller Learning Center that our kids have access to after school. So that they can attend school and still do treatment, and that includes medical management and different things like that. There's such a community partnership.
Sorry, did I hear that right? You have on-site mental. Say that one more time again.
On-site mental health IOP, intensive outpatient treatment.
I want to make sure people hear that. I don't want to skip over. That's why I'm jumping in.
Absolutely.
Inpatient out. Say it again.
Intensive outpatient treatment.
I can talk today. Okay. So you have that there, and that piece is very unique, as I understand it, for a schools district?
Absolutely, yes.
And so they can get all that intensive treatment, and then they can zip back in and continue their education.
Correct.
So they're not separating them away from that.
Absolutely. So for that student, and it's not for every kid, because some kids we need to remove from school so that they can concentrate on treatment during the day. This gives them the opportunity for that kid that's highly anxious about missing school or the transition after missing school and getting off track with school contributes to their anxiety or their depression or whatever their mental health diagnosis is. They have the opportunity to do school and then go to treatment on site in district. So it's accessible, it's available, and I also work with community agencies. I don't ever feel like I don't ever feel like I can ask for too much when it comes to community partnerships. And so I work with community agencies to provide free and reduced services to our kids and our families if there's a crisis situation. And that's what relationships are all about. This kid needs a bed, this kid needs a spot. Like right now, what can we do to help work this out?
Yeah. So we're starting to come close to the end of time. I will ask a few questions and maybe get some shout outs too. How do we change the world? Easy question. Let's start with the easy ones first, right? Yeah. How do we change the world? I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Love on people and develop relationships. I'm huge about developing relationships. I can't help you if I don't know you. If I can't connect with you, I don't know what you need. Kindness, I think to me, carries over to every issue that we have. A kid that won't connect, you can't serve. A kid that doesn't like you, you can't teach. And so if you develop a relationship, if you can connect with that student, with that parent, with that community member or that resource, because it takes a village, And we have to get outside of this new culture of just about me and I'm going to work independently. You're just a piece of the pie. I'm just a piece of the pie. If I don't get all of these additional resources around the table and we don't provide wraparound services and everybody has a vested interest and we put our heart into it, nothing will change.
That's powerful. Yeah, so connection, community, letting it be a village approach, everybody together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So speaking of love and connection, anybody want to give some shout outs here today? I heard you have a couple of kids.
I do.
And a husband.
My precious kids. Drake is 26 and he is in the U.S. Navy full-time serving and currently in Charleston, South Carolina. So thank him for his service.
Thank you for your service, Drake.
He's wonderful. And then I have Trenton, who has given me my new grandbaby, who is 3 months old. And he is here local in Fort Worth. And he is an aspiring music artist, and I am very proud of him. And so I have a brand new grandbaby, Nova Marie, who is the biggest blessing in my world right now. And then my baby girl, who is on her way to the Navy, Manaya. She is shipping out in May, and she will be joining the U.S. Navy. And my wonderful, wonderful Keller ISD team, my intervention team, they are phenomenal. They work so hard. I could not at all carry out anything that we talked about today without my team. They work tirelessly. And I'm extremely proud of them. And I'm all about their wellness and self-care and taking care of themselves so they can take care of others. So that's the dynamic you saw when you saw us.
Yeah, and it shows.
Yeah.
Yeah, you create a great team.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for being on our show today.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Well, we definitely want to have you back.
Take care.
Yeah. So it takes a village, it takes love, it takes connection, it takes understanding to make a difference in the community. If you thought this was helpful, if you got something out of it, please share it with other people, especially your friends, family members, anyone who's connected to a school that wants to learn more about how mental health can affect education. And we'll see you next time.